Hello and welcome to the Your Food Matters podcast. I am Dr. Sue Kleiner here with my great friend and colleague, Erik
Hello,
Bustillo.
hello. Hey, Sue. Hey, everybody.
Hey, it's so good to be back in the chair again.
That's right.
We are here talking to you across the nation from Miami to Seattle. And so happy that you've joined us today. If you enjoy our podcast, please share it with your friends. We are on all the podcast networks and platforms, and you can watch us as well as listen to us on the Move Nutrition Network YouTube channel. So, today we are carrying on from our teaser on our last episode, talking about learning and memory, keeping your brain healthy and fit along with the rest of your body. How do you do that? What things matter? Your food matters for sure, your movement matters as well. Other things that you can do in your life really impact the health of your brain and central nervous system, right, Erik?
Most definitely, yeah. And it's such a fascinating topic, too, considering something like how do you get things to stay here, right? And it's not like we don't have to think about it. It's just like a part of being a human, right? You learn things and it's your memory and all of that. But as we age, it seems like that starts getting affected. And is it because we do less of the things that keep us young, kind of like going off of like the previous episode? Or are there other factors? Obviously, there's presence of illness, there's dementia and Alzheimer's and those things, genetic factors and all of that. But what can we do and what can we control to help make sure that that stays as best as possible?
And it really is astounding. I told you that I had been in Cleveland, Ohio to receive my Cleveland Heights High School Hall of Fame honor. It
Woo
was a
woo.
really big deal, and there were 9 of us from all different graduation years, and the oldest of us was 102, a gentleman who had received the Guinness Book of World Record for the oldest practicing physician when he was 98. He's a neuroscientist, neurologist, may have been a surgeon, I'm not sure, but neurology was his specialty. And to be in the presence of a fully functioning, healthy 102-year-old brain was awe inspiring. He could he was funny. He was well aware of what was going on in the world. He knew what was happening culturally. He was aware of Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift, and that was apropos because the Kelce brothers graduated from my alma mater, Cleveland Heights High School, and had received a Hall of Fame award. And so this gentleman was Dr. Tucker is his name. You can even find his speech on YouTube if you look up the 2023 Cleveland Heights High School Hall of Fame award. It was such a magnificent talk. It was the best of all the 9 talks given.
Wow.
Very clear, like I said, very present, very current, funny, uh, and and really something to experience because I don't think we often get to see uh, or experience such a high functioning brain at 102 years old of life experience. And so that was really something. So now I have a goal, right? I have to I may not make it to 102, but as far as I go, I want to definitely be in control of what's going on in my head. So I've really thought about what are the things we can do to maintain the ability to both remember, which we know kind of starts to slip over the decades, and learning and memory are kind of the same. I actually learned that back when I was in the neuroscience literature in the late 1990s as I became interested in nutrition in the brain and how do you feed the brain and is it different is there any difference from sports nutrition? Which there are different things. And so that's what I want to talk about today is, some of the things I learned then and how much we have actually learned in the 2 decades plus since I started that research. And then in 2007, I wrote the book, The Good Mood Diet. And that was about feeding your brain, staying healthy and fit. And um, so that's our discussion for today.
Awesome. Yeah, and it's a fascinating topic. It really is because again, well to the neurosurgeon or neurologist that got inducted to the Hall of Fame with you. That's amazing. It's over 100 years old and so with it. You would think that he's got it all figured out potentially, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've been around old people my whole life, and the oldest survivor was my dear Aunt Rose, who did make it to 102, but she was not herself past about, I'd say, 98. And it was a very hard number of years to watch that decline from a woman who was very sharp and very independent. So those are my goals. So at the there's like what's at the top of the list? What are the things that we can do? And we left off our last episode talking a lot about movement and exercise. And I want to sort of continue from there to start with. We'll certainly get into the nutrition and do we need supplements and all of that. But I really want to talk about one particular factor called brain derived neurotropic factor. In my world, it's BDNF, but brain derived neurotropic factor. Um, Neurotropic factors are in control of cellular proliferation, meaning do we get new cells, and differentiation, um, the function of the cells that continue to multiply. And it allows for what we used to think didn't exist in as we aged, which is brain plasticity, meaning that our brain continues to change and evolve. We used to think that you kind of reached a cutoff point at aging, and there was a decline in our ability to continue to develop our brain and our brain cells. And we know today that's absolutely not true. And the term is called plasticity, our ability to continue to learn and have high functioning memory. One of the things that really impacts that from little children, from the day you're born until the day you die, is exercise. And so there's a great book called Spark. It was written a number of years ago, and it's about how do you enhance the ability of children to learn, and talking about how we've kind of slowly gotten rid of physical education in the schools. And the recommendation was before kids have math and science or whatever their hardest classes are, they should exercise. They should have gym or PE, or at least get on a treadmill, do something that is um, high intensity, that raises their heart rate and their breathing and their blood flow. All of that also increases this BDNF, this brain derived neurotropic factor that is highly associated with learning and memory. And so this book, Spark, talks about a school system outside Chicago where they actually employed that concept and how much the the learning and test taking and everything, how much the children increased their learning capability just by exercising before they sat down in the classroom. And it's really fascinating, and it works for all of us at every age.
Yeah, and that just kind of proves the point that exercise is, I wouldn't even say arguably, but probably the best thing that we can do to help support our health in some way, shape, or form. Not just physical. You think exercise and you think physical, but with the increase in BDNF secondary to exercise, children in the book learning or performing better in their schoolwork and all of that stuff. And even helping with, like you said, the neuroplasticity. It's like the way that you explained it was great because it's just like how malleable is the brain to learning and adapting to other things. And exercise is like the key, it seems like.
Totally. It's creating new pathways. You need that neurotrophic factor in order to build new pathways in the brain. That is learning and memory. They are one and the same. So, yes, so stay active. Uh, Sleep also critically important. That's recovery. And so very important for brain health as well as memory and learning. Once we get past sleep, there's the list. So, sunshine is really important, stress reduction is really important. One of the interesting things that we get asked a lot about intermittent fasting, that we get asked more about, does that help with weight control? There's some interesting data about brain health and intermittent fasting with the idea that when you let your gut rest a little bit, all the energy that is sent to the gut to constantly focus on digestion can be moved elsewhere in the body. And the brain takes a lot of energy. About a quarter of our energy needs every day are used by the brain. I mean, just think about that. It's profound.
Yeah.
And so, and so, if you take time to rest your gut, the energy required to constantly be digesting. And of course, even when you're fasting, whatever you ate 8 hours before is still being digested in your lower intestine. Uh, but there is some release of energy available to recovery of the rest of the body, working on other places, and particularly the brain.
Yeah, that's it's always been so interesting to me how the brain, from a weight standpoint, it's maybe 2% of our body weight, but it's 20% of our metabolic needs
Right,
and
right.
metabolic
Actually,
costs.
yeah, nearly 25%.
Also,
I
even
mean,
more.
it's really, yeah, it's really stunning. And so then, of course, when we get to nutrition, first and foremost are calories. Make sure that you are fueling yourself well, eating enough so that you can give that much energy to brain function. Carbohydrates are very important. Carbohydrates are the preferred energy for the brain. Now, when we say preferred, I'm not saying the only, but preferred means that the brain prefers to burn carbs, to use carbohydrate. It can alter metabolic pathways to use a secondary, less preferable energy source, which is ketones or fat. The metabolic metabolites of fatty acid metabolism. And so you can use fats, they are not preferable. So it does take time. If you go on a very low carbohydrate diet, you will experience, believe me, feeling pretty bad for some number of days until your entire body metabolically shifts to using the metabolites of fatty acid metabolism for brain fuel.
Yeah, that's that adaptation process for some people can be really tough. And I always find it fascinating to hear some people talk about. You know how it is with nutrition. People get very. There are diet
Right? It's
tribes.
right,
Um,
right. It's like, their religion.
yeah, yeah. So that's why my advice to a lot of dietitians and practitioners is don't be nutri-religious. It doesn't have to be dogmatic or anything. Um, but it's fascinating to hear people respond to the from an essential standpoint. We don't technically need to eat carbohydrates because our body can make them from the protein that we eat and all that. Now, that's not optimal, but somebody would hear what I just said and say, you don't need carbohydrates, so why are you even
Right.
eating them? And say, no, we're not saying that that's
Right.
right. You don't want to use protein as energy. You want protein to do what it's actually supposed to do, you know?
Right.
Um,
Right.
but yeah, so it's always interesting to hear those camps. And then, they're people wonder, like, well, what about ketones and those things? I mean, there's a time and place for it. Like, if someone has epilepsy, right? If someone suffers from
Right.
seizures, then we know very well that the ketogenic diet is the route for them to at least try. It works quite
Right.
well.
Right. Or it complementary to other things that they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. But carbs are still going to be that preferred, like, brain fuel.
Right. Right. And of course, I mean, just to put sort of the bow on this this specific topic, is that yes, there is such a thing as individual variation. And while
No.
while 98% of the population feels better when they have carbs in their diet, there's always going to be the person who actually has lived 30 years on a ketogenic diet and says they feel great. And it's not up to us to say, no, you don't. I mean, there is individual variation. But in general, um, people think, perform, sleep, feel better when they have carbohydrates in their diet. And then we can get into the individual sources of the carbohydrates, and I'll get to that in a minute. Well, so those are carbs. So we said calories, we said carbs, of course, protein, so that protein is used for the jobs that protein is required to do. And your immune system is working, your enzymes are available, you are manufacturing these neurotropic factors. You need protein in order to do that. And then there are a host of micronutrients. We can talk about vitamins and minerals, but in addition to the vitamins and minerals, there are factors that we know play an important role. And when it comes to brain health, probably I mean, there's kind of three at the top of the list, I would say. We're going to start with creatine. If you're alive, you're using creatine. In fact, we're starting to think that creatine is probably uh, some kind of an essential amino acid. Or not amino, as an essential nutrient. It's not an amino acid in particular. It's made from amino acids, but that it is probably uh, some kind of an essential nutrient because of the function that creatine has and the amount that we can make in our bodies and the amount that we need to consume to reach the total need. So, creatine, I think of as an energy vessel. Creatine combines with phosphate to create high energy bonds that your body then breaks to access energy. That happens in every single cell of your body, in every single system. Creatine is not only used to build muscle, that's where it became famous, that was the original research. But today we know it is important for health and wellness and benefits every cell and every system in the body, from male and female reproductive function to brain health and central nervous system function. And it has been shown in multiple studies to impact cognition and memory at every age. So it's hard to get in enough creatine from your diet. It is predominantly from animal proteins. Many people are reducing the consumption of animal proteins in their diet. You get about 1 gram per pound of animal protein. And we recommend 3 to 5 grams a day just for general health. And when it comes to brain and bone health, we probably need a little more. And we don't know exactly how much more yet, but that's sort of the recommended supplemental amount, 3 to 5 grams. I don't see anyone eating 3 to 5 pounds of meat a day.
No, at all. And that the 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 idea that we can get everything that we need only from food. Um, I'm not a proponent of that thought process. Even though I encourage food and food first as often as we can, creatine supplementation. I'm not going to eat a pound of steak and or 5 pounds of steak or whatever else to try to get as much creatine as I can. Supplementing really helps. And then to your point of 3 to 5 grams is what we've seen for skeletal muscle mass and the muscle effects. But I know Dr. Darren Candow recommends his number is zero point 0.1 gram per kilogram, right? So if you're 70
Right.
kilos, you're taking 7 grams of creatine monohydrate, and who knows, maybe it's more. Is there truly a saturation point when it comes to creatine for the muscles? We know that there is, but what about the brain? We just don't know that yet.
Right. And so, I get asked the question often, well, what was happening with brains when before we were supplementing, 10,000 years ago? Well, there's some interesting anthropological data. One set of writings come from native or indigenous peoples of the Arctic area, what we call Eskimos, and their intakes, because they ate predominantly fish and predominantly fish, period, end. I mean, there's not a lot of green stuff
Yeah.
to eat up there year round. And in fact, the amount of fish in the diet on average led to about a 3 gram, an average of 3 grams a day. And so that was in more current times, not 10,000 years ago, but more current times. The other is if we look a little further back to think about, well, on a daily basis, hunter gatherers, and then even as we started to to farm and have agriculture, when there would be meat available, there was no ability to store it. And so you'd go out hunting, you'd get your prey, and you would um, eat it all at once. So there was a very high consumption of meat in a short period of time that probably lasted. And then if we go way further back, well, brains were smaller. We don't really know what the need was at that time. So to say that as we and we know that as we had more access to food, we evolved, and so that was probably a factor as well. So that question comes up. Why would we need to supplement today for optimal performance when we probably performing pretty well? Always remember also that the lifespan was much shorter. So our needs as we age um, uh, continue at this 3 to 5 grams a day for what we understand today. And that's a big one. I have been taking, as you said, the 0.1, a little more than 0.1 for me, but 7 grams a day for about 2 years. And for 30 years before that, I was at the 5 gram a day level. So I can tell everyone it is absolutely safe. I actually just talked to the Creapure folks, Alzchem. They are the German manufacturer, and they have, as of today, 66,000 studies published in peer-reviewed journals. So there is nothing that has more research than creatine. So that's my first recommendation. Next along the pike is omega-3 fats. And we did a whole episode on all the, the ways to get in omega-3s and the variety of omega-3s, in addition to DHA and EPA, that you don't have to depend on fish oil. But because these omega 3 fats are so critical for anti inflammation in the brain, as well as maintaining the health of the brain cell so that it can continue to be what neurologists call fluid, meaning that it can move around. It is plastic. It isn't rigid. When it's this description as fluid, it's easy for the chemical and electrical impulses to move from one brain cell to the next. When they become rigid, well, it doesn't move quite as easily, and you can't think and remember nearly as well. So the omega-3 fatty acids are critically important. And then the last one, as far as supplementation, is, well, you could be eating a lot of fish, let's just put it that way. And certainly plant foods, getting in the variety, flaxseed, ground flaxseed, um, and a number of plant foods and nuts and seeds, grains and beans. They all have the variety of omega-3 fats, as well as fish. And then the last one I want to talk about is choline, sort of the three at the top of my list. There's going to be a whole bunch more that it's going to be at the bottom, but choline is half of the most abundant neurotransmitter in your body, acetylcholine. Acetylcholine works every time you think and move, so 24/7. And it stimulates your muscles to contract. It also crosses into the brain, and it is functioning as a neurotransmitter, sending messages from one brain cell to the next. Choline is also part of a very important compound called phosphatidylcholine. Phosphatidylcholine works with another phospholipid called phosphatidylserine, and those two help uh, create channels in brain cell membranes so that toxins can pass out and nutrients can pass in, and you can keep your brain cells healthy, among other important functions in the brain. And so the problem with getting in enough choline is that the predominant food in our diets, do you know what it is, Eric?
For choline,
Yeah,
like the source of it,
yeah,
I,
in our
I want
diets,
to go. I want to go with eggs.
yes, egg yolks. So, so Americans have been low in choline ever since we were told to start dumping the egg yolks down the drain to save our hearts. And in fact, there was never any data to show that egg yolks in a healthy person raise cholesterol levels. So number one, if unless your physician tells you to stop eating egg yolks because you have a genetic predisposition to building cholesterol, there is no reason not to eat egg yolks. And one egg yolk a day gives you about a third of your need for choline every day. So you can imagine that most people are not eating one egg yolk, let alone three. Um, and you don't need to eat three. You can also get soy in abundantly, get choline in from soy. We're not big soy eaters either. And if you're using soy protein as a supplement, if it doesn't have fat in it, it won't have choline in it either. It's in what's called the lecithin fraction. And so there's soy lecithin. When you eat whole soy, like from tempeh or tofu or the whole soybean, edamame, then you're getting in some choline. If you use um, some kind of lecithin, other kind of lecithin, as a supplement, you're probably getting in choline. So we have plant style and animal style egg yolk and soy, but typically, as Americans, we don't get enough in, and so we need to supplement with choline.
So would it be safe to say? Because sometimes you'll see like soy lecithin, like in a protein shake or something. Do you think that that has
Right?
choline in it?
Probably,
Gotcha.
may not be very
Yeah.
much, but probably. And the other thing is, I mean, just to be clear, choline is not some bizarre compound. It's actually a B vitamin. So you might see it listed in your daily vitamin mineral supplement. The thing about choline is it's not very bioavailable. It's hard to get across your gut membrane, and then it's particularly hard to get it to pass into the brain where we would like it to be used in phosphatidylcholine. There is one kind of supplement called citicholine. It's you also see it as CDP choline, as the brand Cognizin. That is actually phosphatidylcholine. And so it is very well absorbed, crosses the blood brain barrier, and gets into your brain. And so I am a very big advocate. We have seen 2 decades of research on the Cognizant brand of citicholine, and they have shown that 250 milligrams a day does enhance cognition, reaction time, eye hand coordination, in a number of different kinds of populations, from young to female and older. And for memory in particular, a 500 milligram a day dose enhanced memory in older, I believe, in older women. And so it is a very important nutrient to consume. You can get it from food, but if you're not, you should supplement.
So my main takeaway from those three is keep taking my creatine, keep taking my omega 3 fish oils that I'm taking now, on top of the fish that I'll also eat, and almost every single day I'm having at least 3 eggs, whole eggs.
Awesome.
So I'm
You
good.
are good. Right. You are good. So I often get asked when I talk about choline and egg yolks, people say, well, should we still eat the white? It's like, yes, please eat the whole
All of
egg. Don't dump the whites down the drain.
it.
Eat the whole egg. And unless you have information from a healthcare provider telling you not to eat egg yolks, please eat them. And so I also have at least one egg a day, and sometimes more. It just depends. I've been doing this for decades, and it is critically important for whole body health as well as brain health. And then there's kind of the list of all the others that we learn about: coffee, green tea, uh, highly colored fruits and vegetables, red, purple, green leafy vegetables. All of those have components that are important in, particularly the highly colored fruits and vegetables, in anti-inflammatory compounds. And we know that many of the degenerative diseases of the brain are problems with inflammation, chronic inflammation. And so the more you can control that, the longer you can keep that tamped down, the better.
Yeah, yeah, we see that inflammation really is. I mean, it's gotten quite popular, and it's become this like buzzword. Unfortunately, because when that happens, I kind of get like triggered by it. But there's truth to it, Inflammation. If we can avoid all, there's some necessary inflammation, but inflammation that causes disease and whatnot. That's we. How can we keep that down as best as possible for as long as possible?
Right. And this brings me back to one of my favorite topics, which is whole grains. So, the bad news bears about grains talk about that grains cause inflammation. And um, it's not the grain's fault, it's what humans do to them. Just to be clear. And the data worldwide show that we could reduce chronic disease globally, as well as particularly in the United States, if folks would increase their intake of whole grains to 3 servings a day. before you took anything else away from your diet, before you avoided sugar and salt, the biggest thing you can do is increase your whole grain intake. But if you find that you have issues with whole grains, whether it's gluten, well, then eat a gluten-free whole grain. There are those available. And when grains are processed in certain ways, so grains that are fermented, grains that are soaked, grains that are sprouted, all of those processes decrease or even deactivate the pro-inflammatory compounds naturally found in raw grains, which nobody eats, and and enhances their anti-inflammatory function. So, eat the whole grain. It doesn't have to be bread, it doesn't have to be pasta. It can be cooked whole grains, and you will benefit tremendously.
You're like the grain queen.
Yeah. Well, I love the farmers here in the Skagit Valley, in the Pacific Northwest, and certainly up into Canada. I know a number of the farming families that produce such wonderful grains. We can go out into Colorado, and there is the Colorado Grain Chain, and Dr. Nana Meyer, who is both a farmer and a professor at Colorado's University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, promoting in the indigenous foodways that are bringing back many grains, as well as the ability for all of us to access healthy, well-grown whole grains, and then to learn what to do with them. And as I said, it's as easy as cooking rice. It is no different. You can access these whole grains in many grocery stores today. You can find farro and einkorn, spelt, of course, wheat berries, corn, whole brown rice and different colored rice, amaranth, quinoa. Many people know millet, all delicious whole grains. Several of those that I named are gluten-free. And so don't be afraid to try them. They are rich in nutrition, they are savory additions to your diet. And then, if you want to eat or bake bread or make pasta, purchase that as a whole grain. Really, if you have trouble consuming those, then try to find true sourdough fermented whole grains, and that whole grain breads, and that will likely be a better choice.
Gotcha. So people definitely have plenty of options, uh,
Yeah,
whether gluten containing or gluten free. A lot that people can do there.
right, right. So we've gone long, but it's a big one, and I could remember everything I needed to talk about.
Put that memory to use.
And yes, I mean, use your brain. We didn't talk about that in particular, but you know, there's no particular activity like playing games, like doing puzzles, all of that. It's just do everything. Use your brain. It's like a muscle. You have to use it or you lose the pathways and the function. And so stay current on things that you hear about, that you want to learn about. We need to continue to practice memory and learning. So I think we're done. I think I've finished to the bottom of my list.
Rock and roll. So a big episode, information or packed with information, I should say, and hopefully people put this into practice and their memory gets better, maybe their mood gets better, and all of those things. Also, I didn't know about your 2007 release of the Good Mood diet, the Good Mood food.
Right. So it's, there's nothing wrong in the book. It's just now missing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's a long time ago, right?
Yeah.
16 years of research, and there's a lot of things that make a difference. So keep staying strong, and we'll hope that you tune in with us next time. Thanks, Erik.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.